Welcome at this lunch seminar about gender balances and imbalances in STEM education in Rwanda. My name is Marije van Breda and I'm the coordinator of Educate. Educate is the Belgian platform for education and development. I'm your host today. Before we start, I will tell you a little bit more about Educate. One of the goals for Educate is to increase the knowledge and to share good practices from different countries with our members and partners of the platform. About 50 Belgian actors, organizations, which are working in education and lifelong learning, are member of the platform, providing quality and inclusive education to all children and young people is the overall objective which connects all our member organizations. The seminar today wants to enrich this discussion on education and equity challenges by giving the floor, on the one hand, to organizations and to academics on the other hand. The seminar has been organized by VVOP, Educate, and with the support of APV and the Belgian government. It's now 12:30 or 12:40 Belgian time. The session will take 1 hour and a half, so we will end at 2:00 p.m. Today we have two speakers. After each intervention, you have the time, there's a moment foreseen for Q&A with the audience. The participants who are following the discussion via Zoom cannot ask questions via the chat box. But if you want to contact us after the seminar and ask questions, please send a message to info@educate.be. and we will ensure follow-up. I want to highlight also that the session will be recorded. May I ask the participants in this room to be quiet so that the participants at home can listen very well and they can hear us. And also when you ask a question after the intervention, speak loud out and clearly. So let's start with our first speaker. Dr. Julie Kubagiza holds a PhD in education from the University of Bristol. She has a long career in academics and leadership positions in Rwanda. Currently, she is a senior lecturer at the Center for Gender Studies from the University of Rwanda. Julie has published articles and teaching materials on various topics, including gender and education, peace building, social cohesion in education, gender and local governance, ICT and education, AIDS, and so on. Next to her academic achievements, she also takes up leading roles in civil society, being an active member of several women organizations. Our second speaker is Inge van der Pijveren from VVOP, Education for Development. As a global strategic education advisor, she advised on secondary education programs at VVOP. She studied pedagogical students, science, and joined VVOP in 2020 after several international experience. She was involved in a multi-stakeholder research project on gender and STEM in Rwanda. Inge is a very active member of Educate platform. She's being involved in the project group of environment, and she's working also in the upcoming international conference from Educate in October about climate and education. Inge will start with an introduction to the topic of the session, gender and STEM education in Rwanda. Inge, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks Marije for the nice introduction. I'm really looking forward to do this in person. It's been 2 years or so that we could do this, so I'm quite excited with US audience, also not forgetting the online participants. Thank you for joining also. So this seminar focuses on STEM education, on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. And so this STEM education in general, and for girls in particular, is prominent in the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. It's at the forefront of accomplishing the SDGs, from the use of digital technology for economic development to meeting health and environmental challenges. STEM professionals expand the scientific frontier, but STEM competencies such as critical thinking, technical literacy are also perceived to be beneficial 21st century skills for society in general. And governments around the world share a strong belief in STEM education for long-term economic growth and put in place policies to make STEM education more attractive, not only for boys, also for girls. And the policy objective to attract more women into STEM is not only pushed from an economic development perspective, but is equally defensible from a human rights and scientific perspective. Women and men have the right to choose a field of study and work based on their interests. Next to this, women do not only represent numbers, but may also bring in a different perspective into STEM fields and innovation. After more than 50 years since research identified gender gap in STEM, women, however, still remain underrepresented in STEM fields of study and occupations. Worldwide, women scientists make up only 33% of researchers, depriving the society of the innovation that diversity could bring in. Most research on the drivers of these gender gaps have been carried out in high-income countries in Europe and North America. The scarce research done in sub-Saharan Africa shows a different picture, however. Attitudes towards STEM in general and among girls in particular tend to be more positive in these countries compared to the West. And the finding that various gender differences in occupational choices or aspirations are larger in countries which lead international gender equality rankings is called gender equality paradox in STEM. So suggesting that gender gaps in STEM widen with national gender equality. In this seminar, we want to share some insights from the case of Rwanda, where at first instance, our own research findings confirm this trend of more gender balanced STEM attitudes in a sub-Saharan African context. Diving a bit deeper into the findings, however, and also taking into account the findings from the research of Dr. Joly, we realize that we need to further qualify these encouraging findings. And that's what we will try to do also today during the seminar. Please, you can start your first presentation. I will cater for the slides.
Thank you very much. My name is Joly Bangisa. Have introduced me. I would like to first thank you all for, of course, and team for inviting me to Belgium, and also for inviting me here to come and participate or even share something from my own country, Rwanda. I'm happy to be here anyway. I like already what I'm saying. So I would just start by giving this introduction about the 2020 Agenda for Sustainable Development, about leaving no one behind. And I think this applies very much to STEM subjects, just like Inge was saying. The importance of studying STEM or focusing on STEM for different countries is there. So I think what we'll be trying to understand here is why we're seeing these gaps or these differences, at least for women and men or girls and boys. So mainly we'll be looking at the two SDGs, of course, the importance of education and then the gender equality. Okay. So I think she has also mentioned that there's underrepresentation of women or girls in STEM this world over. And then one of the studies by UNESCO, they seem to say that girls, they appear or they lose interest in STEM subjects as they get older. And this gap, apparently we start seeing so much in the upper secondary and then higher education. So when we come to Rwanda, I think most people, I don't know if everyone knows where Rwanda is, or if you've heard about it. But in Rwanda, there has been effort really to promote gender equality in all areas, but more so in education. And we've seen steady progress over the last 20 years, at least in terms of access. More girls have come to school in secondary, primary, and even there has been improvement in higher education. So when we see the statistics, they show us that there's parity in terms of access at primary and secondary level. But we see gender differences when we come to STEM. So if you can see just the table just to illustrate some of this. If you can see, these are statistics from Mineduc. I've just used the year of 2020, 2021. I think because of COVID, this year was like an overlap of the other. That's why we have like 2 years in one. So if we see at primary education, you can see that the male students are around 3.2. So it's almost the same for girls and boys. And secondary education, we start seeing even girls becoming more in the secondary level than the boys. Then when we look at the TVET, TVET is for us, I think everyone knows what TVET is, technical and vocational. If we look at from level 1 to 5, but there's also level 5, which is mainly, level 6 and 7, which is mainly in the polytechnics, we see a drop of girls' participation. So we have like 53.3% for boys and 46 for girls. And then when we go to the polytechnic, these are more like specialized courses in mechanics and all that, engineering. Then we see even a bigger drop in 72 for boys and 33 for girls. Now at higher education, we see again, when we look at the numbers, there's almost not so much difference if we look at higher education in general, 55% for women, for men, and 44%. But when we look at the public higher education, we see again girls dropping more, 66 for boys and 33.7% for girls. This tends to be so much, if I can say, common in Rwanda, that we see a very big, a difference between enrollment in private secondary schools or private universities or higher education and the public. This is because the public universities or the public secondary schools tend to be more prestigious. They take like the best students. So naturally, we find that the girls fall into the private higher education or private schools. So that's why we see big numbers of women and girls there. So that already shows us that there's this difference in the way they are enrolled, and of course the outcomes at the end and where they will get employed and all that. So then when we look at the STEM subjects themselves, the enrollments, of course, again show us that there's a difference. These are the kind of percentages. So if we see upper secondary education, of all the men or the male students who enroll in upper secondary, 62.5 are taking STEM subjects. And for the girls, it's 48.4. In TVET, you can see them it's much higher for the boys. So in TVET, some of the TVET subjects, of course, are like into catering, hospitality, and all that. So we find most girls taking those subjects rather than being into mechanics and all that. Then in higher education, again, 64% of the boys who enroll are in STEM, vis-a-vis 36% of the girls. So we continue to see this difference. There has been a focus in Rwanda on promoting STEM very much, such that at higher education, because they give scholarships for people who enroll in the University of Rwanda, for example, which is the public university, 85% of the scholarships go for the STEM subjects. So meaning that those only 15% of the arts subjects or humanities will be sponsored by the university. So again, that has consequences maybe for girls or even boys who may not be interested in studying STEM. And so there's this kind of pressure on students, whether it's from the parents or they themselves, to want to study STEM, even when maybe that's not their interest. So again, we are seeing some challenges. So now we find that this underrepresentation of women in STEM is kindly attributed mainly to some factors that have to do with the attitudes and perceptions. And we find that this cuts across, it's from the teachers, from the parents, the girls themselves. So a number of studies have been done to try and show that these attitudes. So here I'm just giving an example of a study that we conducted in NESA, and I and some people in 2018. I'm giving this example for mathematics because mathematics is one of the STEM subjects that is almost, I think, on the top of the list in the way girls and boys represent in this subject. So we are looking really at the attitudes and perceptions of girls, boys, or even teachers in the way girls perform and they are enrolled in these subjects. We just had 4 schools, so it's not really a representative study. And 2 schools were private schools and the other 2 were government schools. So yeah, some of the findings were showing us that really mathematics tends to be perceived as a male subject. Really, it's dominated by men or male in terms of teaching and learning, and everyone tends to share this perception. I did not give you the statistics for teachers, but if you look at the teaching profession or the representation of teachers at secondary school, especially, or at higher education, in Rwanda, in my own university, the women teaching at the university is 18%. So in secondary schools, also the women are very, very few compared to the men. So already that shows or informs us of something. Then most of the perceptions were that girls lack confidence, they are lazy, they are anxious in studying mathematics, they are fearful. Some of the girls would say that themselves. When you compare them to boys, some boys also said they're anxious about the subject and they fear math and all that, but compared, of course, more girls. Some girls, of course, excel in math, in the area of math, but these were seen as exceptions, not as the norm. And most of these were considered to be of male character. In Kinyarwanda, there is a word they call ishegabo. It's not a very positive word when they call you that if you are a woman. So yeah, there are so many words thrown around about girls in mathematics. Then the teachers themselves did not seem to be any different. They also have, these gender stereotypes about girls. Like one of the teachers said, girls are only good at memorizing mathematics concepts, but if you tweak a little bit about a question, you find that they miss the point or they don't tend to answer the question well, whereas boys can solve problems and all that. So these perceptions continue. And then when we came to enrollment, there's what we call the combinations in higher education. Well, not higher education, in upper secondary, they tend to categorize. So these were combinations that are related to mathematics, and we wanted to see how girls and boys can enroll in subjects. So maths, chemistry, and biology tend to call LCB, physics, chemistry, biology, and on and on. So in all these combinations that are related to maths, we found that more boys enroll in these combinations, except maybe in mathematics, economics, and geography, if you call they. And even then, it was only in the private schools. Again, there is this tendency of private schools taking on less qualified students, I can say. And also within the 4 schools that we were looking at, none of the schools or subjects or classrooms was being taught by a woman teacher in the mathematics, at least, subject. So these are just to show what I'm saying in terms of graphs. You can see the red is the girls and the blue is the boys. This is the A-level public school, and that is the private school. So you can see that the girls there are more when you look at the red bars, but that is only in that field of MEG, if I can say. So it's half an art, half a math combination. Other perceptions were so much about, like what we're saying, that as girls go into adolescence, they tend to even withdraw more. They're more self-conscious about their image. They are not paying attention in class. Then there were other perceptions about girls liking an easy life, yet mathematics is a hard subject. So naturally, they don't seem to like to work hard. So all these kind of stereotypes. Yeah, but some girls try to challenge this. There are girls, of course, who are doing well in mathematics, and one of the girls said she chose mathematics because she found that there's this common belief that girls can't do mathematics. And for others, they tied mathematics really to the career of teaching, and teaching as a career is not very popular in Rwanda, especially in secondary primary school. So they don't think it's a good job to do. It doesn't pay well anyway. To conclude, I was just saying that really they're about perceptions about girls and the stereotypes about how girls can do maths or science. Maths is just an example of the STEM subjects. It just shows that there's this unconscious sexism about what girls can do in STEM or mathematics. And this continues to really alienate girls in these subjects, because the more people believe, and the girls believe it, tend to believe it themselves, the more they withdraw or draw out of these STEM fields. Then, of course, the underrepresentation also in these fields tends to perpetuate, the belief that girls cannot do it. Like I said, there was no teacher of maths in these schools who is a woman. So what does that mean for the girls who are studying maths? They just feel like it's not their area. They have no role model at all. And of course, this underrepresentation related to missed opportunities. I think he was trying to highlight that both women and men have talent or bring something into some of these areas and subjects. So if they are not there, everyone is missing the talents of women. Just a few recommendations, I think. As I said, in Rwanda, there's this focus on promoting STEM. I really feel it's not going hand in hand in the way maybe we're trying to address gender biases or these cultural attitudes. So girls are being encouraged to study STEM subjects, but how about all these biases and all these cultural issues? So there should be consistency, maybe in the way we train teachers or we give them support to help the students. Teachers have these bad attitudes or themselves. How can they support the students to learn? Then this also is reflected in employment. There are barriers really to working into STEM fields. So we find that even some of the girls who really study STEM subjects, when it comes to employment, they tend to shun the jobs related to STEM. Maybe go and do other things, or they even go into business, or they don't work as a mechanic or whatever, because they feel it's still not the field of women. So then if girls are studying STEM just because maybe they have to win scholarships and all that, that means they are not going to work in those fields, and we continue to see differences. So they should be able to choose the STEM subjects because they really want to do it, and because they're interested. Then I think we need, of course, more research, and I'm glad that they did some research on that for us to continue to inform our policies in Rwanda about really some of the decisions that we make. So, for example, if we are giving 85% government scholarships into STEM, is what is coming out, is what is coming out promoting maybe women into STEM or even all students in general. So to continue to check and see if maybe some of this need to change or improve on some of the policy areas. So that's what I had to share with you. Thank you very much for listening. And I will welcome any questions, comments, your input.
I have a question. Are schools in Rwanda mostly mixed, like boys and girls together? Or is that
Yes, we have so many mixed schools. I think majority of the schools now are mixed, but we also have, traditionally we've had more girls' schools alone and boys' schools alone. I think that something that has been going on because education was really, I think in the past, most of the schools were boarding schools. And even now, some of the best schools are boarding schools. So you find that it is girls alone, boys alone. But increasingly, we have so many mixed schools, especially the day schools.
You said that in Rwanda you're promoting, or I don't know if it's you or if it's the government trying to promote through tackling both the teacher training and the culture and the teachers. How do they do that? More concretely, if you can elaborate a little bit. And the other question would be if you had any success story or case study that positive that you have to investigate maybe what has worked.
Yeah, very many positive stories.
Tell us then.
Yeah, as I said, you can see that there are so many that there. Well, I didn't show the statistics in the past, but there were very big differences between even the enrollment of girls in school, right from primary to secondary and higher education. So that has increased because of the efforts. First of all, the policies are very gender kind of sensitive. We have, for example, over the years, in terms of even infrastructure, more classrooms have been built, more schools have been built to encourage girls to come into schools. And girls are actually attracted and brought into school, especially secondary school, at even a slightly lower mark. So there's some kind of affirmative action so that they could increase the numbers of girls in secondary education. Then we have things like a girls' room. In every school, we have a girls' room, because again, there was a study that was done, and we found that a number of girls miss out on school, especially when they have their periods or during the menstruation, because they can't afford to get some of these. So they have equipped rooms in every school so that the girls can benefit from that. They don't have to miss school. Improving maybe the facilities facilities for both girls and boys, that was also an issue. Addressing issues like sexual harassment, training teachers to bring about this positivity. So yeah, there has been all these interventions. In higher education, there has been giving more room or hostels for the girls so that they encourage them to attend and have somewhere to stay. So they are given priority over the boys in terms of accommodation. So that is also, so there are a number of interventions, and I think they have had a positive effect, but we would like to see. So for example, I was saying that in the way now we are promoting science and STEM subjects, I find that it's not balanced in the way people are really changing their attitudes about and what we should be doing. It's not very easy to come up with concrete solutions, but it's something, of course, I said that maybe that can be done with teacher training to enhance this. There has been a number of programs and materials to train teachers, but I feel it's not as systematic as it should be. So it could be part of the curriculum for teachers, and persistently they do that. There are some institutions that are doing that by themselves, like the Institute for Mathematics and Science, but it's kind of a private institution that is well funded. Maybe they do it better, but within the government institutions or government schools, I think there's that consistency that has to be promoted. So these are some of the examples. Yep.
Do you know if there are also programs in Rwanda to promote boys being enrolled in subjects that are typically perceived as like more women subjects, like more caring jobs and that kind of?
Yeah, but incidentally, we've been seeing boys even present in the so-called what we would call girls subjects, if I can say, like social sciences. We've seen more boys enrolled in social sciences. Yeah, there are some areas like the hospitality industry, like where they are trying to maybe attract more boys because the girls are there more than in TVET, maybe things like hairdressing and all that. Yeah, so, but typically most of the areas, boys tend to dominate the presence, even of subjects that we would call girl subjects or soft subjects. Yes.
So Rwanda is considered one of the countries that is more welcoming private business and other countries' perspective or your perspective. And you mentioned, beds, very low number, but in principle, there are needs from private sector, but probably they are not covered as private sector would wish to employ the quality and the people they need. As you said, there are missed opportunities. So I'm just speculating, but I'm assuming that there could be slots of the market that will not be covered by students that are sufficiently qualified or matching the labor, and that could be covered by club, maybe. I'm thinking of to be in tech areas like Instagram and so on. Are they playing any role in kind of promoting this more balanced than the system in the country, or are they somehow involved in this, either like full bed or discussion with the government or academia?
Yeah, there is. That's what I'm saying. That there's this promotion and encouragement and scholarships and support for girls to go into STEM. But what I was saying is that it is not matched with how society still views women and supports them, because we have higher representation of women, even in all the big positions, even ministers and all that. And you find that they are still expected to play their traditional roles as women and mothers. So there's these cultural perceptions that still don't match what is happening maybe in terms of development and supporting in education and all that. So there's always this cry from women like, yes, we are supported to work, to to go higher in education, but when we come back home, we are still expected to be the mothers and do everything for our husbands and children. So yeah, this mismatch, I think.
What about early education?
Early education.
We have to start.
Yes, I think
Forget about them.
we have to start at early education and also encouraging the women also to have a role in promoting this gender equality right from their own homes and families. Because we tend to think that women are gender sensitive, but we are also born and grown in this culture. And we tend to be the ones to perpetuate and promote gender inequalities within our families, between the children and boys and girls. So I think, as you're saying, right from the family, even at the early age, still a long journey.
There are no other questions?
Yeah, if they're there, I can keep on asking.
I think we have some time also after I do my presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hello?
That's the presentation.
Can I say something? Hello?
Well,
Hello? Hello?
yes,
Can I say something? I have a suggestion.
yes,
Yes, please go.
we can try.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Tom. I'm working with Enable as a learning management system specialist. We support TVET schools for adapting ICT in education. We help them to digitize their courses. We provide them capacity building, use of ICT in education. So my suggestion is, when it comes to gender, there are always discussions around it. I remember I attended one of the discussions where people say that the women, the girls and the boys are having the same capacity, so that the girl shouldn't be favored to do something of which the boys are doing. So they have to work for it, they have to struggle for it. But to me, I don't find it that way, because I remember when I was finishing my high school, we were around 45 in the class. We're doing math and physics section, but we had only one lady. So there are other things that are holding behind the ladies to be in STEM. So I'm happy that the government, the 85% government of scholarship is going to be given by the lady, as Dr. Julie said. But I have another suggestion that we need to encourage ladies and girls. We need to support them, because when you look at different fields, as I said, even at the job, even at when it comes to something related to science and technology, you find there is a small percentage of ladies. So I suggest that with these development partners, maybe we can put different incentives. You mentioned about scholarships, but we can even see how we can find other kind of incentives, like grants for the women who did maybe STEM, any different incentives, maybe in the programs. Among the programs with the development partners, maybe you can see those different incentives that can be given to ladies, or even awareness through radios or everywhere, so that they can be encouraged to be in STEM. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for the contribution. And I think I will also have an aspect of that in my presentation as well. And what are possible strategies that we can now take forward also as development partners? All the participants coming in, that's nice. So as an introduction, how did I start or ended up in this gender and STEM research topic? There was a trigger back in 2020 when I just started at VVOB that we had a finding from an evaluation of an intervention that we did in Rwanda. On the one hand, recognizing that VVOB does take into account gender differences in their programs, but that there is lack of a deeper reflection on why these differences exist in the education sector and what we could do to address them. So triggered with that finding, and then having my background also in research cooperation, I wanted to do something. And so knowing my way around a bit in the funding opportunities at the level of the Flemish universities, I knew that there was an interesting funding opportunity at KU Leuven University, where you have multi-stakeholder grants for young researchers. So it's a type of very small funding opportunity, really set up to connect non-academic actors with academic actors on a development relevant challenge. And definitely with a focus also on young researchers, so starting academics, starting professors, initiating them into the world of, let's say, the SDGs and how research can also contribute to sustainable development challenges. So we set up a multi-stakeholder grant project with 3 different actors, very different actors, I think. On the one hand, KU Leuven, so the university, with 3 staff members participated. Then this is one of the staff members, this is the PhD student. Then we have VVOB, so on the one hand, me from head office at Brussels, and then also a colleague from the Rwanda team. And then we had a 3rd organization involved, which is the Rwandan Association for Women in Science and Engineering. So it's a kind of national platform that brings together role models, female role models in STEM, academics, research, science, and they organize events to sensitize girls to study STEM and to do a career in STEM. So with these 3 diverse partners on board, we have set up this research to try to understand the gender imbalances or balances in STEM education, secondary education in Rwanda. So a very small project of 20,000 euro, so really seed funding to establish these partnerships and to have a first ID and research output to be published. A 1-year project also. And so our drive was really to understand the gendered ambitions to go into STEM careers, to go into STEM education. And then with this funding, this time frame, we also did a bit of a pragmatic choice to focus only on one district in Rwanda, on the Kayonza district. On the one hand, it's an interesting district because it's one of the more disadvantaged areas of Rwanda. On the other hand, it was also convenient that we had already a program from the side of VVOB in Kayonza district, where we implemented or are implementing coding clubs at schools, both for girls and boys, and where we train the ICT teachers and STEM teachers to facilitate coding clubs. So in brief, to have an image of the research that we've done. The different steps in the setup were first to have a survey developed and validated. Then we prepared the sampling of schools and students. We trained the enumerators to do data collection. We also took care of having ethical clearance because we had the aim of publishing also internationally in one journal. So for this, the ethical clearance was important because we worked with minors in secondary schools. Then we had the data collection, of course, analysis of data. And in the end of that project, we also organized a stakeholder meeting to discuss first research results and to see what it brings and the reaction we gave from education stakeholders. So as you have heard up to now, it's a bit of a puzzling picture in Rwanda of having a balanced enrollment in secondary education in STEM fields, low enrollment for girls in STEM tertiary education, and even more striking imbalance at job market level. So our research question, which came forward out of this puzzle, was on self-concept, self-beliefs, attitudes towards STEM. Do you think you're good at STEM? Do you want to do something in STEM? And is that different for girls or boys? And then also what Jolie mentioned, the important factor to take into account is the age difference. Does the difference between girls and boys increase with age, yes or no? So those were two starting points for our research. We then did quite some work on the sampling of the schools. We involved two of the professors from KU Leuven, of the staff of KU Leuven, are methodologists, so they found it's very, very important to have a random sample taking into account important variables for the Rwandese context, like public-private schools, urban-rural areas, also taking into account if the school offers science combinations, yes or no, and then looking at Sophie, also taking into account intra-cluster correlation for school and class level. So in the end, we had the number of, we need 20 schools and a sample size of at least 500 students. We also had 20 backup schools. I also think that's maybe a Belgian reflection of we need backup schools if Rwandese schools does not want to work with us. But if you have the approval of the Ministry of Education and the Rwanda Education Board, the school, they always cooperate. So the backup schools were not necessary. And then after the school sample, we also did then a reflection on the student sample. So taking into account the age range, we chose for the first grade S1, third grade and sixth grade of secondary education. So we had 3 age groups. And in each school, we had 1 class selected, class A, and 20 students randomly assigned to our data collection. We used tablets to administer the survey, which came also with some challenges, but was also quite a nice experience for the students to use a tablet. For a lot of students, it was the first time using this type of tools, which again came with some challenges. And in total, we had 950 students surveyed. So this is based on 915 students from Kayonza. We use the Google Collect tool, which is a very nice application. It's free, open source, and it's catered for very difficult rural circumstances. You can easily use it offline. So it's a very good tool to use in this case. In the questionnaire, we also made sure that we did not only focus on STEM subjects. So we asked about history, about languages, just to make it not too obvious that we were interested in STEM. Because I think also, as you have heard from Jolie, in the context of Rwanda, with the big push from the government on STEM, the aspect of social desirability is very present. So we also try to control for that and inserted that in the questionnaire. And we offered both in English and Kinyarwanda all the questions. Took quite some time to get a good translation, first from English to Kinyarwanda. Then we also did the back translation to make really sure that we talked about the same thing, we meant the same thing. We also had some refugee students who in fact were quite happy with the English questions. So that was definitely a good choice to offer both options. These were all the concepts and variables that were inserted in our survey. If somebody would be interested to see the full survey, you can contact me. I can share it where you can see the questions on how we asked about these concepts in the survey. And then also, I wanted to mention these 2 people, the enumerator team, because they were so important for our research. And they are often highly underestimated, I think, in the academic world. These 2 people really made a difference in the data collection, and they gave their best, visiting all these classes in difficult circumstances, also of COVID, rules changing every day or week in Rwanda. So at VVOB Rwanda, we have a pool of experienced enumerators that are involved in data collection for monitoring and evaluation purposes. So we could check the CVs of the different enumerators in the pool. We looked for people with experience on gender and STEM. We tried also to do a gender balance, so we had a man and a woman in the enumerator team. We organized an online training with them 2-day training, followed by 1 day of piloting the survey in 2 classes in Kigali. And then we realized that the effectiveness of our online training was maybe not so high. The idea was that they instructed the pupils on how to fill in on the tablet the survey, and that the pupils did it by themselves, but they guided the pupils through the questions one by one. But with our methodological staff from KU Leuven, we of course had a randomized order of questions, which did not fit on all the tablets, so it was a bit of a mess. So we decided also to organize a false launch for the enumerators for the data collection, which means that we started in Kayonza with 1 school that was in fact not part of our sample. They did not know that it was in fact not part of the sample, so they thought it was real-life data collection, but in fact it was a test where we could improve still some last twitches, and we did not take into account that data during the research. And then on the very last day, the picture is taken on the last day of the data collection, it was announced that schools would be closed because of a new COVID outbreak, so we were in the midst of a very lucky time frame that we could do the data collection 1 week after it would have been possible. Okay, that's about the research and how it looked like. I now try to give you some of the results and findings. As told in the introduction, related to that gender in STEM paradox, our findings were quite in line with that for the Rwandese context, there did not seem to be any striking gender gaps related to attitudes or beliefs towards STEM, and it was quite similar in a lot of ways. So I'm flipping some down here. Both boys and girls found it very useful learning contents, mathematics, chemistry, and so on. They find it important, they enjoy learning it. They both find it very important to do well at school. Having a degree, they expect to go to higher education. So that was very similar. Also feeling safe or unsafe to be or to go at school, there were no big differences. Also an interesting one, students reported also a higher preference for STEM subjects when they indicated that they had more frequent teacher interaction. So teacher interaction is indeed an important driver and can influence how you perceive STEM and if you want to choose for STEM in the future. Some first differences, maybe a not so surprising difference or gender gap is in the field of study, which is in line with international research on the preferred fields of study. So what do you see here? The typical ones. You have the life and health sciences in green, which is larger for girls, a bit smaller for boys. We also see in black the engineering, machining, architecture, which is very small for girls. I think the numbers, even for mathematics, they line up neatly with international findings and enrollments at that level. What was different for the Rwandese context was on computer sciences. The proportion of girls interested in computer sciences is higher in Rwanda compared to international findings. So that's a topic of interest specifically for the Rwandese context. Another difference which really triggered us is the next one. Okay. And that is really about, do you think that you're good at something, yes or no? And here you see the green triangles are systematically a bit higher than the blue circles, which are the girls. So boys think they are better at all these subjects than girls think of themselves. And it's not only for STEM, it's in general. I see a lot of nodding. I was a bit shocked with this. When you go one step further, if you think you are good at something, yes or no, what do you think in general of are girls better in something or boys better in something? So we had a look at here languages, ICT, and mathematics. Luckily, most of them think they are equally as good boys and girls, there's no difference. But here, both at ICT and mathematics, the proportion that thinks that boys are better at it than girls is almost 50%. So again, what is called the male superiority, the perceived male superiority, that boys can do it better than girls. And what is important to understand, and what Shoni also highlighted, it's not only boys who think that, it's both boys and girls who think that. So you see, when it's split out between the male and the female students, it's a quite similar pattern of quite a high proportion of male students asserting male superiority, but also for female students, male superiority is expressed. When we then have a look at age differences, you see that in S6, the male superiority expression is highest at highest age, so in S6 and lower at S1, which can mean two things, or stereotypes become larger with age, or there's a difference already between cohorts, between younger pupils maybe having less strong stereotypes, growing up in maybe a less restrictive environment than S6 students. Something to investigate further. Another interesting finding was also on the parental involvement. The more students expressed that they had a lot of parental involvement related to school activities, to examinations, the less preference they had for STEM fields of study. So suggesting that, if you see this question, when parents think about education and career paths for their daughters or sons, that not all career paths are seen as proper or desirable, for example, in STEM fields of study. So if I then take a next step, together with our partners, we discussed this quite a lot. I think that concept of female self-confidence is really an important one that came out of the research. And what can we do about it? What can we as development partners try to do to reinforce that self-confidence? So on the one hand, there's the important factor of that student-teacher interaction and how gender stereotypes can really invoke underperformance at the level of girls, but on the other way around, also stimulate girls to go for STEM subjects. The idea of organizing coding clubs like we did in the Scratch project was also put forward as a way of really showing girls that they are able to do this, that there is not a difference in abilities between boys and girls, and to make it also in a fun environment and not too classical environment. Everything related to role modeling initiatives of female STEM teachers and professionals is also put forward as promising strategy to really show girls that they can have the confidence to have this type of career. And also important to realize is that we should not only look at what can be done at school, but that the link with what happens at home and parental involvement is equally important when looking at promising strategies. Then some critical reflections on my presentation. So we only studied Kayonza district, so my title of Gender and STEM in Rwanda is a bit exaggerated, I should say, in Kayonza. We cannot generalize to the whole of Rwanda. For that, we would need additional data. The presentation is now based on descriptive statistics, the first analysis done of last year. There is still a whole bunch of data that we can further analyze, and which we also want to do in a new project which we are writing, and where we would also foresee a PhD student, for example, further picking up those multivariate analysis. We did not control the results for social desirability, so the percentages are not controlled for that, but we did do a check if the questions or the control questions on social desirability were comparable between girls and boys, which was the case. So they both were influenced equally by social desirability, and let's say, the push towards STEM in answering the questions. Another important critical remark that I would like to make is that we also did not link it with the actual performance. If they say that they like to do mathematics or that they're good at ICT, we don't know if they score well, if they do good at national examinations. That is also an important aspect for future research. Then the longitudinal dimension is also something to further take into account of what we said, the differences in age cohorts. What does it mean? Is it a difference between cohorts or a difference in growing up and becoming stronger, or let's say more gender stereotyped? So these critical reflections are things that we would like to take up further in a proposal that we're writing with KU Leuven, with Jolly, also with Rawisse and VVOB, which we would like to implement hopefully somewhere end of this year if it gets selected. And that was also the reason why Jolly is this week in Belgium to do a writing workshop for the proposal to solve a bit further all these questions that still remain. Voila, that was my story.
Thanks to Amy for these interesting insights. Other questions for Amy? Yes.
Yes, you said that teacher interaction is like a very important factor. Is that something, first of all, what is it exactly? And is it something that is like trained now in teacher trainings? Or what, like, most importantly, what is it exactly what you mean when it's
It's the behavior of a teacher in class giving feedback to somebody, which can be, for example, different to a girl or a boy, or the number of times that they call somebody to react on a question and who do they choose, and that's the student-teacher interaction. And what was interesting from the research is that in fact it show a difference between boys and girls, how important it is if you want to stimulate them to teach or to go for STEM careers. But taking into account the presentation of Joy, it's clear that with existing gender stereotypes and norms, they do have a huge influence on the performance and let's say the self-fulfilling prophecy towards girls and their performance in STEM fields.
Esther, you had a bit, I don't know if I understood. So before research was based on an inquiry with tablets in 20 schools. So it was just questions to the pupils.
It was a survey on a tablet. It were 50 questions. It took students about, on average, 45 minutes to fill it in. Yeah, we did it in 20 schools, counting up until about 1,000 students have filled in the question.
This is the research.
Yes.
It's just a very small practical question. The voting cards were not organized yet. I don't think collection. Was there already something going on in schools?
No.
No.
The first cycle was said by the
explain the computer science component. Hearing about hardware.
I don't know if it was already announced. Maybe it was not yet organized, but maybe it was announced. I should
just to
interested to check. But we did not explicitly ask for a question related to the coding clubs in Missouri.
Some, let's see if it was announced. It wasn't. Because it was different than the international result.
I also think that related to ICT that we can complement that there's also quite a government push on promoting ICT in different levels of society, also in education. So that might also explain a bit why ICT is popping out.
That's one of the steps. Very
promoting in everyday life.
The promotion of ICT also in the employment sector, and the push towards STEM and ICT related to schools. We can also find similar activities, corporate related activities in the employment. So much that government services being provided for that. That's what we call it, government. Yeah, very much in all sectors.
And I also think there are a lot of initiatives related to supporting private sector initiatives in that field.
Yeah, yeah. Because I think TVET might perhaps also be a particular role by placing girls into the fields and knowing them related for ICT activities, so that the employer is also along in the story. Because that's what I heard from most of them, yeah, that the employers or maybe the husbands are not always along with the story that girls should pick up.
I mean, that's like the story out there in the public, like everyone is interested, but people privately in their own
families,
families, it's not matched by what's out in the public.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to all. Thank you for the audience here in Brussels and the audience online. I think it was really an interesting session where the academic world meets the practical world on the field. So if you have still some questions, don't hesitate to ask them afterwards. And for the people online, you can send us an email info@educate.be if you have any questions for our two speakers. Thank you, John. Thank you for this interesting session. And thank you to all our participants. And thank you to Lisa for the communication and technical support.
Thank you, Maria.
Don't hesitate to follow Educate on the social media channels for our next and future conferences, the International Conference about Climate and Education in October-November 2022. See you next time, and thanks to all. Don't forget that the presentation, PowerPoint presentation from Dr. John and from me will be on our website and recording as well. Have a nice afternoon. Thanks to all. Bye-bye.